This is the FreedomPay session, Next Level Retail. My name is Natalie Berg. I'm a retail analyst, and I'm delighted to be your host for the session. Joining me on today's panel, we have Barry Stearn, Vice President, Global Program Owner at FreedomPay. Welcome, Barry.
Natalie, good to see you again.
You too. And we also have Pinar Koygun, who is Senior Director of Retail Vertical Growth at Worldpay. So welcome, Pinar.
Thank you, Natalie. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Now, it's very noisy. We have a live audience. We also have a number of you joining us via the live stream on YouTube, so a very warm welcome to both our virtual and our live attendees. Now, Barry, I'm going to start with you because the last time we caught up was in Paris, which sounds incredibly glamorous, doesn't it? And at that time, that was about 7 months ago, you had just announced your partnership with Worldpay. So maybe for the sake of kicking us off for today's session, maybe you could just say a few words about the partnership and how it's progressed since the launch.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for the question. It's a great one to start with. And 6 months, how time flies, right? We collaboratively view the partnership as a product. When we launched 7 months ago, we had done a tremendous amount of work connecting our platforms and building in functionality that would allow the omnichannel proposition do just what it says on the tin, right? So tokenization, certification, validating all the devices and our software components, certifying that with the banks. A lot of hard, tedious kind of miles to cover. Thankfully, we're beyond that now. We're fully contracted. We have a really robust pipeline. Through the lens of a product, the omnichannel proposition, or Worldpay go to market with the platform as omnichannel, right? So it does just that. We have some really great merchants that have onboarded onto the platform. Obviously, that's the most important thing, is solving complex payment challenges for enterprise level merchants, whether that's in retail or in hospitality or whatever vertical that they happen to be in. And we're delighted with the velocity of the partnership and the product as well. We've a really strong and robust pipeline coming, and we've lots of exciting products that we're delivering as well over the course of the next 6 months.
Fantastic. Pinar, is there anything that you wanted to add around the partnership from a
Barry
Worldpay perspective?
summarized it really well. It is a huge focus for us, omnichannel commerce, and we are really excited with our partnership with FreedomPay, who are the market-leading provider in omnicommerce. So, as you mentioned, we've got a steady pipeline already for this partnership, and we are launching more and more countries and capabilities together. So it's perfect timing, and we are looking to do more in the coming months.
Fantastic. So we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail throughout the conversation. But I think if we kick things off with the consumer, because it's been a tumultuous few years for consumers. There's been a lot of disruption, a lot of volatility. It does feel like we're coming out the other side now with inflation beginning to ease and things just generally looking a little bit brighter. What's your take on the consumer right now?
Well, I think you've summarized it excellently, right? If we look at where we've come from, it's been a really chaotic consumer environment to live through, and we are all consumers, right? Not just talking about this through the lens of a payment partnership or a merchant's point of view, but really as a consumer, there's been so much change and tumultuous challenges within the ecosystem, to your point, from interest rates to inflation to conflict, global conflict, and all things that drive our behaviors as consumers, whether we fully appreciate it or not. So one of the things that really stood out for us early on in the partnership was a singular view of doing what's right for the consumer, and by extension, servicing that technology within the merchant's environment. But both Worldpay and FreedomPay have an obsession with doing the right thing by the consumer and providing optionality and payment instruments and ways to pay that the consumer dictates to the market, right? So very early on, we recognized that synergy, and I think that's really helped drive the partnership at a product level. You know, there's any amount of payment options that could be asked as a requirement from a merchant, but really focusing on which ones add the most value to the merchant is where we're hyper-focused and delivering those. And that changes from region to region, from country to country, from geography to geography. So having the finger on the pulse of how a modern current consumer wishes to pay and taking that technology into the payment ecosystem is something we're keenly focused on.
Yeah, managing that complexity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think from a consumer's perspective, I mean, we want it all today, don't we? You know, we want value, or we need value. We want that frictionless experience. That was a word that came up a lot in the earlier session. We still want quality. We also care about the planet, and we want to make sure that, that our purchases are, we want to feel good about our purchases and that we're doing the right thing. So there's a lot of evolving and sometimes conflicting demands from a consumer perspective. So I guess just taking a step back from payments for a second, how kind of do you see retailers catering to such heightened demands from consumers? Maybe Pinar, if we start with you, just your thoughts on how retailers can cater to the ever-evolving consumer.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned about the economic situation, especially the change that we saw in the past 4 years. We've recently run a survey which brought about interesting findings that we saw a homogenization across different age groups when they're shopping for retail or whatever they need. So when we looked at the behaviors, what is driving that homogenization is adoption of digital era, how they're shopping across multiple channels, whether getting things subscribed, getting things delivered, buying online, getting it delivered, or going to a store or shopping on social media, right? So whilst all these options are available, customers are making more conscious choices now. They are creating wish lists, learning more about the product, so they have more of an inclination to connect with the brand. So they are more demanding, as you said. So for retailers, what is more considered to be important is kind of finding the catch point, bringing all these demands together, driving what new loyalty means. For example, recycling, bring back the packaging, get a loyalty point, or getting things upcycled, recycled. Even pre-loved is a new trend now that more of the conscientious consumers are looking to buy or, re-energize what they had in their wardrobe. So it is not as hard as it might seem to catch that interest and meet the demands of the consumers with the use of technology. Yeah. So understanding where the consumers are and how they're interacting with the brand, and again, utilizing that information to offer what the consumer is asking for is the, I guess, go-to strategy for retailers.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's just about being relevant to your customers.
Exactly.
Isn't it? And that requires constant evolution, constant innovation as well. And I know, Barry, in the past you've talked about the democratization of tech. How has this influenced shopping behavior? And I guess as we look to the future, if we just jump ahead into the future for a little bit, are there any kind of trends or innovations that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think it's so that's a big question, right?
It's a huge question. Sorry.
I think if we look at consumer trends to start with, during times past, there was a huge demand for digital and browsing and purchasing online, because that was the necessity born out of the pandemic, right? So digital transactions skyrocketed. I think 90% of all transactions were started and completed online, driven by necessity, right?
Yeah.
And as the consumer environment is normalized somewhat with the proliferation of technology as well, there's a yearning within the consumer cohort to have a more tactile, experiential buying journey, right? So where we see people may have started their journey online to start with, they're now browsing, to your point, Pinar, building a wish list, researching the product, all of the things that are important to them as a consumer, whether it's green attributes, whether it's environmentally friendly, whether it's pre-owned, pre-loved, and then taking that experience into the bricks and mortar environment and completing the purchase in store, which is a complete pivot to where we were only a couple of years ago. And I think that speaks to the human nature of the consumer, just yearning for that experiential touch, look and feel. particularly when it comes to purchases of significance. So everybody has less expendable income in their pocket. So when they're making that purchase, that really means something to them, that they've been tracking online for a number of weeks or months. They just want to cap that off with a human experience in store as well, and the data certainly points to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as consumers today, we are hyper informed, and even though the majority of sales still take place in a physical store, most of those sales are digitally influenced. So it is about embracing that technology and accepting that, sometimes when a shopper walks into a store, they know more about the product than the store associate, because we're all so equipped and informed these days. Pinar, anything to add around the consumer before we move on to the retail landscape?
I can share a bit more about our findings. 50% of the people that we question in a pool of 5,000 people, 50% said they shop 3 or more channels, and a quarter said they shop on 4 and 5 or more. So the true omnichannel you mentioned about in-store, it is strong, but then there are multiple ways of shopping. They might see something on in the store, but to your point, go and check it online on the marketplace app or brand's website. So it is really key to provide that unified approach and touch with the consumer in every point that they search through, with finding ways to connect with the brand. So that trend has been around. I mean, omnichannel is not a new term, but I think it's being redefined what it truly means for shoppers, for the consumers today. And I think as the trend is set to grow further, it is perfect timing for retailers to embrace it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think we've seen the proliferation of choice in a physical setting on the high street, but also we're seeing it in the digital world as well. So it's not just about shopping online anymore, but you have marketplaces and D2C and quick commerce, and you have social commerce and live shopping. I mean, there's this proliferation of channels. I imagine it's hard for retailers to manage that complexity and ensure that you're offering consumers that seamless experience. So I guess just how do you think that today's shopping experience is compelling enough? Like, how would you rate retailers' progress in terms of, I mean, we say omnichannel, but we're also moving towards unified commerce is sort of the new way to describe this joining up of different touch points. So how would you rate retailers' progress so far? Do you think we still have more to do?
I mean, I'm an optimist, so I'm more on the positive side to say yes. But then when I shop personally myself, I see some brands are really taking the lead in store experience or online, and some others are really disconnected. They might have a great store in a great location, but the experience that is offered in store doesn't really match with that premium look and feel with the brand, or vice versa online as well. So I think there's a huge opportunity to step into and really unify and connect. I mean, I'm not going to repeat myself on the omni experience point of view. So with the technology, I think retailers who are adopting and taking that first, maybe the baby step to kind of understand the demands of the consumers and really not being afraid of making incremental changes to their experience in store and online is kind of surfing with the wave. So my answer would be the opportunity is only growing, and retailers, some are faster to adopt, but the greater number is still yet to follow.
Yeah, it's continuous improvement,
exactly.
Isn't it? How about you, Barry? What does next level retail mean to you?
I don't think we can afford to be too critical of merchants who are striving to have a consistent retail channel and experience across all of their ecosystem. I think you need to be cognizant the type of customers that we're approaching through this partnership are complex by their very nature, right? They're very often cross-border. Localization from a language and currency perspective needs to be catered for. Specialized or unique local payment methods within those markets also need to be catered for. So I think where merchants are striving for a consistency, that in itself is would indicate they're on the right track. They're aware of a need to have a consistent merchant experience, and the more that they listen to and understand their merchants, or their customers, I beg your pardon, or the cardholders in this case, the more they will be in tune with how they can optimize their experiences. And we talk a lot about loyalty, not brand loyalty, but retail loyalty as a product being intrinsically woven into the payment experience. The more you know about your loyal customers, the more you can understand the data behind their consumer attributes, the more you can drill into tailoring your experience to cater for your loyal customers, right? So for us, loyalty, which is an intrinsic part of our platform, is as valuable, if not more so, than the payment itself, right? We gather the loyalty data from the payment experience, but they are bound together for a reason, and that's to allow us to give our customers, partners, and merchants actionable data where they can then use that to tailor their experience.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess something that we have seen really accelerate over the past kind of 12 to 18 months is real-time personalized promotions and offers. It feels like that is the way that things are moving, and it's a great opportunity for retailers to better connect with their customers at the point of purchase. So I guess how do you see this evolving? Do you think retailers are making enough of that data today, or do you think this is a journey? You're smiling, Barry.
I am. So part of FreedomPay's go-to-market, and particularly through the lens of the omnichannel proposition, is just that, is providing customer merchants with the data to allow them to make decisions. And we do that in a number of different delivery methods. We have a lovely front end that they can query and see how one store is performing, with attributes such as weather, time of day, Gen X versus Gen Y, certain cohorts of the population. And that allows them to very seamlessly dig into the consumer data, or we can give them a flat file with all of that information and allow their data teams interrogate it as well. To answer your question, probably not, no. I think there's a huge amount of data there. The challenge for the merchants becomes understanding the important data points within that subset of data and leveraging that against their particular business drivers that help them achieve a level of loyalty with their consumers, also offering real-time discounts, offers, and rewards, to your point.
Yeah.
And meaningful discounts, meaningful incentives, and meaningful rewards. So things that will, as a consumer, will appeal to me based on my previous buying experience.
Yeah, and you've put out some previous research that showed that consumers are open and they want these rewards if they are relevant, if they're meaningful, as you say. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it is about offering what something that's relevant to your customers. So it still feels though that there's this disconnect, moving away from loyalty now. It still feels like there's still a bit of a disconnect between our payment experiences online versus in a physical store. Even if we just look at the choice that's available. And in Paris, it was one of your colleagues, Lee, who made the point that you can't walk down Oxford Street scanning QR codes. And that really stuck with me because it's so true. As consumers, we expect to pay in different ways, whether we're whether we're shopping online or in a store. So do you think we'll ever get to a place where there will be no barriers or no distinctions, or do you think certain payment options will always be more relevant for certain channels?
Yeah, I think your last point there is exactly right, that you need to first of all verticalize the opportunity or the merchant, right? They're in a hospitality or a lodging in a hotel scenario setup. The payment requirements are going to be very different to a retail store, right? So we need to be cognizant and aware of how those different consumer channels change as you step through different verticals and different types of retailers, right? So
there's not necessarily a need for consistency there, would you say?
Consistency within the vertical, yeah, I would say so. And I think we're getting there. Like, if you see the proliferation of wallets is one thing that contradicts what I've just said. It kind of transcends all verticals, right? Where it's possible. The consumer's first payment option is typically to use the wallet payments. And in the global payments report that Worldpay have published recently, I think it really pulls that data out around proliferation of wallets. Wallets aren't new, right? But they're now also being used as a payment instrument, as an object to contain your loyalty attributes within as well. For offers, rewards, discounts, for open banking, for FX, for all sorts of useful things as a consumer. So I think we need
Yeah.
to. I think we need to look at that question in the context of a vertical, but then there is some clear data that says certain payment instruments are adding that consistency.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up digital wallets because that brings us nicely to my next question, which is totally unplanned, but thank you, Barry. Pinar, I do want to come to you because, and Barry just referenced our global payments report. In that report, you called out that digital wallets accounted for half of global e-commerce spend last year. It's the fastest growing and most popular payment method. As digital wallets advance at such a rapid pace, are there any kind of challenges or learnings that maybe you can share? Anything that retailers should be aware of as they kind of ride this wave of digital wallet adoption?
Sure, digital wallets are already, as you mentioned with the numbers, taking a huge portion of the commerce today, and half of the consumers we surveyed said they have used a digital wallet in the past 12 months when they shopped online or in store. I guess the main challenge for retailers is understanding the ask from the consumers, which wallet, the variety of wallets. When we say digital wallet, it's not one selection, so there's a selection underneath that subsection as well. And I would slightly disagree with the homogenization of the payment options. You can't have 20 options on your checkout, so you need to know who your customers are and offer them the right selection. So knowing that the digital wallets are on the rise, which option under that subsection is most driven and most demanded by your consumers is the key to make that decision. Whether, I don't want to select the names, but whether it's PayPal, Apple Pay, or WeChat Pay, or Alipay, you need to know which market you're going to be able to offer the right selection. Otherwise, it's just way too long of a checkout if it's online. And when in store, obviously it's a different story. Some providers may or may not be available already, but I'm always coming from the consumer to strategize anything when going to market.
That's really interesting. And it brings up a really important point that sometimes with anything, too much choice can be overwhelming, can create friction, can create decision fatigue as well. So it is about knowing your customers and what they want. I want to get your thoughts on cash, because I asked the earlier panel this question as well. And Pinar, I was surprised to see in your global payments report that cash still accounts for 16% of global transaction value. That still feels like a lot, and I'm sure in some markets it are more heavily skewed towards cash. We know it's a downward trajectory if you look at the growth rates, but it still seems to be relevant for certain consumer groups. So could you talk to this trend in a little bit more detail? Do you think there's still a place for cash?
I think it depends on the economy. When you look at the global scale, there are the developed economies where the digital wallets, as we talked about, or the different options on mobile or cards, debit cards, credit cards are more dominant. But in the global scale, some others may not be as developed, or the access to the bank accounts may not be as visible, or the age differentiation. I mean, I talked about the homogenization earlier, but then when you go to countries like Turkey or India or Far East, you still do see differentiation of options when it comes to payments. And there are also different incentives offered as well, whether it's obvious to consumers at the point of checkout, but it also exists in countries like Germany as well, right? It's the consumer behavior. Some segments of consumers are slow to adapt to change, and even there's a hesitancy to still pick up a new payment method to utilize. So I don't expect it to disappear, but then as the generations move along, as the shopping behavior shifts, I think it is going to decline.
Yeah, and I know, Barry, we've talked about this whole tech-averse demographic, and you've kind of just alluded to it as well. Do you think that we'll ever get to a cashless society, and are there any markets that we can look to for inspiration?
Well, there's data there to prove that the Nordics are very fast adopters of digital currencies. to the point where a lot of merchant environments don't accept cash. I think we need to be really careful with the conversation around cash for the points we've just spoken. I think at a practical level, it can be expensive. Cash, from a retailer's point of view, cash can be an expensive tender option. But more importantly than that, knowing there is a tech-averse generation out there, and us all as custodians of technology, we need to be cognizant that we're catering for people who don't have a wallet, who believe it or not, don't have a smartphone, and that probably have at this point in their lives, that won't have a smartphone. So all of the technology that's coming along and innovation is kind of irrelevant for these people at this point. So for that reason, and from an inclusion perspective, I think it's incumbent on all of us to highlight the fact that cash is very much still a tender option and should be promoted as such. Cards, wallets, aren't going anywhere. Digital payments aren't going anywhere. And in time, to Pinar's point, I think we'll see that generational shift into a technology as people who are using smartphones today evolve and grow older and take that technology behavior with them. But just to double down on that, I think it's an important conversation to have to ensure that we maintain cash as a tender option for those technology averse cohort of our population.
Yeah, and not leave anyone behind, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm glad you touched on financial inclusivity, because I want to ask a question around buy now, pay later, which is another alternative payment method that has really revolutionized online shopping in the past few years. It has faced some well-documented headwinds, and I know you acknowledged this in your global payments report, things like rising interest rates, looming regulation, souring investor sentiment. But consumer demand for this service doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. So where are the opportunities, in your view, with buy now, pay later? What should retailers be thinking about?
You said it perfectly. I think the demand is not slowing down. The findings that we observed are some of the consumers are dropping at the checkout if they don't find a buy now, pay later option. And that's not even related to the income level. They can be on the higher earning band or the lower ending earning band. So it is the demand and the flexibility, because there's more of a temptation to scroll down and shop instantly, and people are more, finding it easier to spread across whatever they're buying and maybe returning later. So the flexibility and the option is what is driving that consumer behavior. So I know the regulation is there and approaching, but as long as the demand is there, I don't see it slowing down. But finding different angles and a variety of options, whether it's split payments or buy now, pay laters or regulated options, the demand will be there. I don't know if you have anything to add, Barry.
Transparently, I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to buy now, pay later, but as a consumer, I did notice obviously the huge push for that service kind of over the past number of years, and equally some of its decline as well. And I think just again, I would have consumer concerns about that product being available for everyday commodity purchases. I think it's got a place for certain goods and certain purchases, and I think broad adoption of buy now, pay later. I have a few queries over myself. Getting a takeaway on Klarna is kind of feels a bit of a stretch for me.
Yeah. So we'll have to watch this space. I want to come back to your partnership and get your thoughts on something that you highlighted earlier, which is around navigating payment localization. So what does this mean for both FreedomPay and Worldpay, and how are you adapting to the needs of local consumers?
Sure. Yeah. This is what we spoke about earlier in terms of both our collective approach to our merchants and to the consumers, and how we're hyper-focused on delivering the solutions that are required through this omnichannel partnership. Some examples of that are live on the platform today are WeChat Pay, for example, which is kind of ubiquitously available across the omnichannel, Worldpay omnichannel platform, delivered by FreedomPay. We're scoping out Alipay now for the very same reason. And more broadly, if we look at European markets, Spain, Germany, and France, they all have their own domestic payment instruments. So we're delivering Girocard in Germany through the partnership, which will allow domestic local debit cards be used kind of by domestic Germans, and the international cards processed as well. Carte bancaire in France for the same reasons as well. And we have delivered a connection to Redsys, which is, if you like, a processor in Spain, which allows us to connect to up to 20 of the domestic banks in Spain as well, which lowers interchange. Good news for the Spanish merchants, and really is a prerequisite for being successful in that market as well. So, yeah, we've got it all.
Fantastic. And sorry, Pinar, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, only to summarize and maybe to add one final sentence. We are super excited with our partnership with FreedomPay, and this is a major focus for us this year to make it a success. So far, we've delivered quite substantial results, and we've got much more to still discover and deliver. So more to come, I guess.
Absolutely.
And as a final question, is there anything you can share with us today about your plans if we look ahead over the next 6 months?
Sure. So we have, I would say, very close to full execution from an EMEA perspective. So the solution is live. Merchants are on the platform, transacting. We've delivered everything we said we would in that market, with the exception of some localized payments. Next steps is to bring that consistent experience to North America. We're already kind of scoping that out, and a lot of the development work is underway. We do have connections in those markets today, but this is kind of really like going to put that connection on steroids and add feature functionality that will open up a lot of new opportunity for both of us. And then when we're finished with North America, we're going to turn our guns on Asia Pacific and really double down on some of the really interesting markets out there for us. We're live in Australia today, but we're looking at Hong Kong. Japan is a conversation as well, where payment methodologies are entirely different to what we're used to here. In UAE and other markets such as that. So lots delivered, lots more to come.
Yeah, exciting times ahead. Fantastic. Pinar and Berg, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to chat to you.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks so much.